Alright, so this is going to be a more in-depth tutorial than the previous one I made, which was silent and really didn't cover some stuff, which I just kind of took for granted. So if you see something and you're like, I already know how to do this, or I have a better way of doing it, I prefer doing it my own way, go for it. Don't let me stop you. This is really just going to cover as many bases as I think need to be covered in order for someone to go from start to end on creating an emote. With one exception, if you're looking to import stuff from like Fortnite or other games and stuff, that's beyond the scope of this. You're going to need to look up a tutorial for how to extract animations from your game of choice or whatever. It's way too varied for us to go through that. That being said, we do have a custom animation rig here, which I'm going to make I've already made one custom animation for. Well, I've already extracted it here. Just for an example here. It's pretty good to animate with, in my opinion. I'm going to do one real quick here, just show another process. We get an animation clip, so we'll have two that we can work with for the sake of this tutorial. But, you know, again, either animate with this is what we recommend because it's weight painted like it is in game. So whatever you see here should be pretty much exactly what you'll see in game. But yeah. Before we get into that, though, there are a couple prerequisites. As you can see, Unity is one of them. Unity 22.3.9 is what you're going to want. I'll have the links for all four of these items in the description. You just want to click on this, install with Unity Hub if you don't already have it, because this is the same version of Unity that Lethal Company runs on, so that's why we're getting this exact version. Later on, when we're exporting, you're going to need Git installed on your computer. This is, technically speaking, you don't have to have Git, but it makes it a lot easier so you can just download straight from GitHub once we need Asset Bundle Browser, which we'll get to that. In my case, it's just, you know, download for Windows, and then you're gonna want probably 64-bit. If you don't know which one you want 64-bit. Those are the two mandatory steps, I would say. I mean, like I said, technically Git's not mandatory, but you really should just get it. -2. Anyway, Blender, you'll probably need. It's not technically required, but if you want to animate with this, you need Blender. Sometimes when you're importing stuff, Blender can be useful to touch up stuff. So, you know, Blender's not required, but you get Blender. I don't know. You don't necessarily need Blender 4.0.2 or whatever the newest version is when you download, but if you don't already have Blender, just download the most recent version of Blender. And for once we get to the audio portion, setting up audio, again, this isn't required, but if you want to make your emote mod not take up a bunch of unnecessary space for audio quality that most people won't be able to tell, you're going to want FFmpeg Essentials 7-zip. I mean, just for reference, this is just going from FFmpeg's Windows builds. And you're going to want Essentials, which we'll get to how to actually use FFmpeg later. Again, that's not required, but I'm going to show you how to use it to convert stuff to OGG. Technically, Opus is better, but I don't think Unity supports Opus. So we're going to do OGG format. So again, you know, for the steps that require stuff like Git or FFmpeg, if you can find a way around it, or if you just don't feel like optimizing your audio, I mean, that is a you choice. Yeah, that's the required prerequisites. Again, Unity, good luck avoiding that. Git, you should have. Blender, you should have. And FFmpeg, you should have. Oh, there's also one last, which, you know, you're going to need some sort of a coding setup. I have Visual Studio. It's technically the easiest to go download, but, you know, it's Microsoft, so take that as you will. Technically, I'd rather be using Writer, but I'm just so used to Visual Studio all my life, so that's what I use, and that's what I'll be using for this tutorial. You can use that, or VS Code, or Writer, if you're cool. Yeah, you'll need some sort of coding setup. So that are the essentials out of the way. Now I'm going to go through and make another pose, which I'm just going to fast forward through because I'm really bad at it. No matter how easy a tool is, I'm not good at 3D modeling, so I'm just going to skim through this. and then I'll be back once I get my animation done. Alright, so now we're back in Unity. I finished up my Dio pose here. Put a little bit more effort into it than I planned on, but you know, I think it turned out pretty well. For the sake of clarity, I'm going to delete these since this is all going to be in the example repo. You know, I recommend you keep your old versions of iterative saves, but you know, just to keep it clean for the tutorial. We're going to get rid of those. So now we've just got our most recent blend file here. Going to select it, change it to humanoid up here, just hit apply, and assuming you're using our model, should work just fine, no errors. Then I can select this and Control D to get it out of there, and you can see animation is called scene. I'm just going to rename this F2 to rename, and then Dio pose, just what I'm going to call it. So this is probably where you're going to want to start if you are not using your own animations and you just imported something. Assuming you're at that point and you now have an anim file, either by making it or importing it, this is where you want to start. So up here, if you want to loop or not loop, that's up to you. I'll go through what we're going to do with this in a bit. Alright, and so now that we've got the pose out, I've already set up how I want it, but you can adjust these settings, namely the bake to pose and the based upon settings. I've changed it to this, which seems to give pretty much the exact same effect that I was getting in Blender. But again, your animations may vary. Figure out what works best for your animation. Now that we have this, so you might notice it's kind of a pose. It's not really supposed to end, and that's actually my other example. Also, it's kind of a pose. I'd put much less effort into this one, but it's a pose that needs to hold. So there are 3 different ways you can import animations into Emotes API. There's a single animation, there's a single looping animation, and then you can import an animation followed by a looping animation. And that's how we're going to get the pose to work in both these cases. So if we open up the keyframes here, you can see you can actually, so this is the frame counter up here. You can see what frame we're on, and when I'm dragging over here, you can see the frame, the matching frame here. So I actually only need 92. Well, that's the end pose, yeah. Checks out. So what we're just going to do is Down here, we're going to Control D this again, and that's just going to duplicate. So now we have two identicals. We're going to rename this diopose underscore start. Again, you can rename this whatever you feel like. You can name this underscore loop. This just makes it easier, in my opinion, to like denote them, right? So now in diopose loop, we're actually just going to delete all of these keyframes and only keep this last one, drag it all the way back to the start. And now you'll see, so diopose start is still like that. But now if we look at diopose loop, it's just the pose. It's just the pose. So we're going to feed this into, and we're going to do the same for Jotaro. We're just going to feed this into the start clip position, and we'll feed this into the loop clip position. I'm thinking for the sake of clarity, we're just going to set this all to, there we go. Excuse me. Yeah, because looking at it again, I think that might be best. So we can see that blue arrow pointing forward. And now we can see that blue arrow pointing forward. So yeah, this is their ending on the same pose, same position. Let me do that for the Jotaro real quick as well. You can see it's much simpler. We're gonna duplicate it, and this one Jotaro point underscore start, Jotaro point underscore loop, and we're just gonna get rid of everything else but the pose. You can see that, still that. I mean, it kind of has some extra frames, but it doesn't really matter. And then this is just the loop, nothing else. Coming back to this, because I forgot earlier, you also need to, for looping animations, because of how Unity works, loop time. On anything that's going to loop, you just check that box. Nothing else. Don't do loop pose, don't do cycle offset unless you know what those are and know what you're doing. Don't check those. But if your animation is technically looping, even though, yes, these are just a single frame, it is technically looping, turn on loop time. Again, the start animations are not looping because it's essentially going right there, and then it's going to pass on over to this animation, which does loop, which essentially just holds the pose in this case. So when you're importing audio, this is where FFmpeg is going to come in play. I've got it pulled up over here. It's super simple to make work. So say you've got, your whatever. We'll use this as a better example because this hasn't been trimmed down yet. I pre-trimmed it, but we'll use this as an example. This We Like to Pain. 37.5 megabytes for the whole song. That's not great if you're gonna do an emote mod with a bunch of stuff. So with FFmpeg installed, when you download it, you'll get this. If you unzip it somewhere, go into the bin file, and then you'll see ffmpeg.exe. So if you, and this is for Windows specifically. If you're on Linux, I don't know the exact commands for it. I apologize. But here, you can just click in the search bar, type cmd, enter. That'll pull up a command window already directed to this folder. We can type ff, and we just hit tab because it'll autocomplete. And then we can type dash lowercase I space, and then we want our audio clip, and then we're gonna pretend like we're doing it again, but then delete the extension of whatever you have and do OGG, and then run that, and pretty quickly, there you go. Now it's done. So now you can see instead of 37.5, it's 2.48. Yes, it's compressed, but for most cases, you don't need the whole quality of a WAV file or whatever you have. So I highly recommend compressing to OGG before using audio tracks for emote mods, because again, I mean, that's a single song, 37 megabytes. That adds up really quick. And yeah, it makes download time long, it makes startup time longer, loading worse. So try and avoid large files. Not required though, but for everyone's sake, try and avoid large files. Once you have the audio files in Unity, there's two things you want to check. This makes loading better and can avoid stutters on first time playing of emotes. You want load in background and preload audio data. So this is what those two are going to do is basically say as soon as the game, save, I'm doing for the other one. As soon as the game starts up, it's going to essentially preload this audio. Because if you don't do this, for small sound clips like this, it's not noticeable. But for long stuff like We Like to Paint, if we were doing that, it will stutter. Because it's the first time you play the audio clip is the first time it's ever going to try loading it. So it's going to basically hang your game until it can load the audio, which usually isn't too much, but just do it. Just do it in loading. That's what the loading screen is for loading stuff like this. So a little tip, and while you can't necessarily use this in game, we're looking into a way to make this work with Emotes API, but we have nothing right now. Specifically for animations, you can use this for props, which we'll get into later, and it works phenomenal for making prop setup work. Like, it's honestly the only part of Unity that I would consider very usable and doesn't feel like I'm fighting it, and it's the playable directors, which makes timing stuff so much easier. And again, while you can't necessarily use it for the animation / audio, you can apply it to a character. Like I'm just applying it to this. You can apply it just to see, and you can drag it around and hit play at any point. Spacebar is what I'm doing to play, by the way. Drag it around and play at any point, and this can really help trying to sync up audio and animations. If you have iffy sources on either one, and you need to figure out like, oh, how much like blank space to this audio do I need, or how much can I trim it up by to make it line up, you can move stuff around. Granted, keep in mind with audio and animation specifically, again, we're trying to make these timelines work with Emotes API, but at the moment it doesn't. Audio and animation will both play on the first frame each. So by the time you figure out where you want it, they should both be sitting at frame 0 right here. And if that works, then that's what you want. Again, with props and stuff, you can do your own thing. And the audio source and the animator are exposed in code. So if you're very literate with your if you have some high tech skills and you want to go for it, you can totally make a timeline work. Like I said, we've figured out it's definitely workable, but it's not supported by the base API right now. So again, good for lining up stuff. Just remember, before you're done, make sure animation and audio both start at 0. And if it lines up, then it lines up perfectly. And this game object with the playable director will just be in part of the example repo. So, I mean, you don't have to think about it too much. Just load up this scene, the outdoors scene, and pull up the timeline over here, and yeah, there you go. Alright, and so now that we're ready to export our animations and audio to the game, we're going to need to create asset bundles for them. So you could technically do this. It's kind of rough. If you really don't want to have to install something, you can add the asset bundles this way by just clicking on it down here. There's asset bundles. I don't recommend that. What I recommend is go up here, Window, Package Manager, and you're going to want to find this is by Unity. I don't know why it's not in the Unity directory anymore, but you just have to use its Git now. The asset bundle browser, which if you click code, you'll get this, which you can copy. Again, link for this will be in the description. Then you can add from Git URL, paste that in, wait for it, and there it is. And so with that downloaded, you go up your window and you'll see now you can access Asset Bundle Browser, which, it's over here, sorry. You'll just see this. And as it says, you can drag assets here to start creating asset bundles. So we can drag one just to start. And you can see it's going to create an asset bundle with that asset inside. Now, personally, what I recommend is rename this first one to animations and create a new bundle audio. What you're gonna want to do, and again, if you ever update your mod, just drag more into these. You can just replace the asset bundles it'll create with the new ones. So keep that in mind. You can always just keep adding to these too. That's my recommendation. But if you have a different way that you like to organize stuff, again, go for it. Whatever, it's just organization, whatever works best for you. But so we're gonna take all 4 of these, drag them in. See, we got all 4 in here. Audio, we're gonna take our 2 audio clips, drag them into here. And now you can see we've got our 2 things. Now if we go to the build tab, you're gonna see a little bit, you could go down here. So sometimes what we did with Badass Company, since OGG is already so compressed, we actually didn't, we did 2 build cycles. So we did the regular build, which I'll do now. That's gonna build both the asset bundles and create 2 bundles, which I'll show you where as soon as it finishes, where you can find them. However, with the audio already compressed, it makes more sense to use no compression on the asset bundles, because in our testing, it saved basically no space and only added load time. It's a little bit more work, but I recommend doing it if you're compressing your audio before putting it in an asset bundle, because again, the standard compression here is going to do nothing. All right, so once you have your 2 asset bundles, in this case, you're going to want to go to your Lethal Company folder, specifically whatever already has BepInEx. If you haven't installed BepInEx somewhere, you should do that. You can get it either here or through an R2 Modman profile. You can access, if you have a profile already set up, you can browse profile folder. You can see it's BepInEx folder here. So make sure whatever you're doing is in like a BepInEx plugins folder. BepInEx. So in here, you're gonna want to make a folder, and for reasons I will get to later, it's because Thunderstore is a bit strange with legacy, for legacy reasons. We're just gonna call this test folder. We'll call it test emote mod. And inside of this, we're going to create a folder which is actually what our mod is going to be called, or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to call it example emote mod. And then inside of that folder, that's where we're going to create a folder named asset bundles. And then finally inside of that folder, that's where we're going to put these 2 items. Again, it seems kind of weird at first. Trust me, it'll make sense once I get to it later. But we'll get to that after we're actually ready to build and compile the mod. Alright, so now we've got that folder structure set up. Again, it looks like this, with all the way down to asset bundles holding our 2 asset bundles in it. We're going to switch over to, in my case, Visual Studio. If you have a different coding setup, it's all good, go for it. And we're going to start here. Let me close stuff just so you can see it from the beginning. You'll probably be greeted with this. You're going to want to open your CS project file, which is this little thing with the C#, in my case. You might have to double click it just to keep it open. And there's going to be 2 things here that you need to change. This, both of which have comments on them, you're going to want to change this, and you see what I'm highlighting, it's highlighting the identical one. These 2 to point to your Lethal Company directory. Specifically, whatever has that BepInEx folder I talked about, which then contains your mod plugin folder. So again, you can use an R2 Modman profile for this if you so choose. That's okay. I'm just doing it through my main Steam manual install. But so we're looking for this. You can click here to, it'll auto highlight. You can Control C and go in here and paste that in. Now it's the same because I already set this up with mine, but your folder structure may be different. It may be the same though, because I use the default file structure that Steam liked, which Many of you probably will also, so this probably works fine. Keep in mind, if you're working with multiple people, this is actually pretty straightforward to do. You can copy this, paste this, and they paste their directory in here, and it will pick the first one that it finds that exists. So if you have this that exists, it'll go through, it'll find, hey look, we've gotten this, but on their computer, say whatever folders here doesn't exist, then it'll look at this one, see, oh, this does exist, this folder exists, so set this property to this item. I know it seems weird having them both there, but that's what's happening here. It's checking if this exists, and if so, it's setting this BepInEx parent directory to this. So again, you can copy paste that for multiple people. Again, there's better setups for this. Rune setup, Cake build systems for our core mods, but I feel like that's a little bit much for an example emote mod. So, you know, it can be better, but this is, I feel, pretty easy enough for just an example mod. And then down here, you can see it's change example mod wherever you named your folder. So you can see this kind of goes down BepInEx parent directory, BepInEx directory, plugins directory. And so that's where we are here. That's what this $ parentheses plugin parentheses is. That's essentially looking at BepInEx plugins. So that's where we are here. So you want to change this example mod to test emote mod in this case. And then you need to actually go another step further and copy this example mod and do a / and then paste that in. So what this is going to do is the destination folder for the DLL we're going to build ultimately is going to be inside of this folder right next to the asset bundles. That is the most important thing to remember, is the DLL needs to be put next to the asset bundles folder, because that's how the assets file is set up to read them. If you want to modify it to do something else, go for it, but by default they need to be next to each other. So with that done, we can close out that, we can save and close the CS_proj file and double click on our example emote mod CS. Now once in here, you're probably, since I've had it open, you've probably noticed there's a few errors. I really just have these errors here to make sure you change them, because these need to be unique to your mod. Because if BepInEx sees duplicates, it's just going to skip whatever second, third, fourth, fifth one it finds. It's only going to actually read the first mod it finds with the GUID. So what we're going to want to do, in this case, I'm just going to name this com.weliveinsociety.test emote mod. Again, name it whatever you want, doesn't matter, just make it yourself. And the plugin name, we're gonna call this test emote mod. Put some caps in there to make it look better. There we go, looks a little bit nicer. Plugin version 1.0 technically doesn't matter, but you know, good practice. Every time you update your mod, increment this by breaking version, feature update, hotfix/patch number. But again, that's just semantics. If you have a preferred numbering scheme, don't let me stop you. That's just how I would suggest naming it if you don't already have a preference. In addition, you should probably also go over here. I'm not going to do it right now, but you should probably, for both of these items, the CS_proj and the CS file, you should click on them, press F2 or right click, rename, whatever works for you, and name them to something that probably more matches your mod instead of just having an example mod out there. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do down here, we're just going to go through this. Don't worry too much about these. They're just for plugin info and stuff. I won't worry too much about it. This, just so you know what it's doing, you see loading from load asset bundles from folder, asset bundles. So hypothetically, you could rename this to whatever you want. Just make sure to rename it here as well, because that's what it's looking for. That's what those align with each other. And then you got emote parameters, which there will be something akin to this when you download the repo, with comments trying to describe as best I could what each thing does. You probably will not need all of the, especially like start pref and join pref, which are elaborated on, but for simple mods you probably won't need them, but they're always there. Right now I'm going to, real quick in post, I'm going to get an example of each one of these items and what they do, so you just kind of know generally what they do. But again, there's comments here if you have any other questions. Now that we're back here, so we're going to import our animations. So you can see here, there's already kind of something here. I'm going to replace this. So if we look in our Unity project, this is also in the manifest files. This is just where these these paths are also in that manifest file. If you'd rather just open that, it's all there as well. But we're just gonna eyeball it from here. So you can see the path is assets, Jotaro point start anim. Doesn't have to be capitalized in code, doesn't really matter, but if it helps you. Technically speaking, in assets load, if we go to this function, you can see it removes assets from it. Engine just appends it if it has it. This is just shorthand so that anything, because everything will be in assets unless your Unity project is very strange. I don't recommend ever doing that, because if you do, you're gonna need to remake this. But that allows you to shorthand stuff, so it's just, in this case, it's just Jotaro point start. And there's nothing else I have to type because, again, it's base assets folder. It's just implied, essentially. So that's our primary animation clip. Now we're going to want a secondary animation, so I can just copy this, paste it here. And if you're curious as to why there's these square brackets, it's because these are actually animation clip arrays. If you should desire, you can have more than one animation clip sets that it can randomize between. Now, the one thing to note is for every animation clip, or excuse me, if you have more than one, you need to have the exact same amount as secondary animation clips. Because if you don't, it's going to complain. Yeah, you can see it must be the same size as the animation clip. If we pick animation clip at 3, we also pick secondary animation clip at 3. So that's what we're going to want to do. But keep in mind the secondary animation is our looping animation. So we just rename that to loop. And then we need our audio clip, which is this. Again, assets gets truncated. So our primary audio clips, we do assets load audio clip. Audio clip. Text here, and it's Jotaro.ogg. Yeah, and so this is important. Audio clips you can use similar to the animation clips, where you can have a startup audio clip and then a looping audio clip, and that's what the secondary audio clips are for, should that ever be a use case you have. However, we don't, so we actually need to specify looping here to be true, because you can't exactly do that in Unity since these are all being pumped into a single audio source, which is part of Emotes API. Like it says here, you need this if you're importing a single audio file. If you're doing 2 audio files, you could just leave that off because there's no use case for having 2 audio files that play after another where this wouldn't be looping, because then you just make it one audio file and just keep it under primary audio clips. We're going to go to list more visible. Yep. We don't, these are not syncing animations. We don't need people syncing necessarily. We're going to rename this to Jotaro point. So this is the custom name. Keep in mind, there's the internal name, which is Jotaro point _ start, but this is what people will see in the UI of Emotes API is Jotaro point. That's what will actually play that's what they'll see when they want to play your animation. Lock type is head bobbing. That's fine. It's barely an audio clip, so that's not going to get claimed. Audio level, we're going to put that at like 0.3. It's not super loud, it's just kind of pointing, but it has some, so we'll give it a little bit of enemy detection. I'm not too concerned about root bones with this because it's just an example. You saw in post what it can do, so we'll just leave it here for now. I don't really want this to stop when you move, but for the sake of demonstration, we'll, not on, true. For the sake of demonstration, I'll turn it on for this one and leave it off for the DO pose. Third person, again, we'll turn it on for this one, and we'll leave it off for this one. We'll turn it on for the DO pose just to show the differences. And display name, as it says, it replaces the emote in the top left corner when that should probably be emote name. in the top. Oh wait, the name. I'm dyslexic. Even it says here, if specified, it will replace the name of the emote in the top left corner when emoting. That's when you're playing it tells you what you're using. Again, primary for hidden emotes, because hidden emotes might have strange properties. TF2 emotes utilizes this, so odds are you won't need to specify this, but if you ever need a specific name in the top left that doesn't match custom names or anything, then this is what you want to do. And then finally, we call add custom animation with the emote params that we have been changing this whole time, and that will import the emote. There's a little bit more here. We'll get to that later. That's a little bit more advanced. It's not too complicated, but yeah, after the tutorial is done for the main animation and audio, I'll then go into adding props and stuff, should you desire to add props to your animations to spice them up a little bit more. But for now, we just need to add the second animation, which some may cringe at this, but I'll get to that in a moment. Just trying to keep this simple for those who might not be too used to how programming works. So we're just going to copy paste what we had there, leaving out this animation clip params because we've already declared emote parameters, so we just want to reset it effectively. And all we have to do here, instead of Jotaro, we're going to replace this all with do pose. This is going to be do pose start, do pose loop, just do.ogg, do pose. I think everything else here pretty much looks fine. Oh yeah, we'll turn stop and move off, and we will turn third person by default on. Again, third person, users can override this, they probably will, but you can specify what the intended view type is for your emote. Alright, and so now you have this. You might be saying, wow, that's kind of annoying that you just have to copy paste all of that every time, and I don't even need half the stuff on here. Yeah, it's always going to be visible. I don't need that. That's great. We can make a function for that, and I recommend doing it because you can see this can add up a lot if you have more than like one emote. So what I personally recommend is creating a function for every general type of emote you're going to import. So we're just going to do public void import animation, curly brackets there. And so if we think about what's similar between these, and if you think you're going to import 10 more animations that are only using the same params as the rest of them, you can save a lot of space. So what we're going to do, we're going to copy this one more time, paste it down here, and we're going to say, okay, so for these animations that we're importing a bunch of, what do we really need? So looping, yeah, that's true. True. Oh. Huh. Yeah, okay. I don't know why I said this audio looping is true. This should not be looping audio. This makes no sense looping. Please forget I ever said that. These audio tracks make no sense to loop. That would be very strange. So we're gonna turn that off. But that's something we could import here. So if we say, okay, well, every animation we're gonna need a animation clip array of primary clips, and everything we're gonna need is gonna need another animation clip array of secondary clips. Okay, well, we know everything's gonna do that. Well, let's, some things might want to loop, some things might not. We actually do want to check that. So if we just do bool looping, let's see, what else? Primary auto clips, yep, we need that. And we're just gonna assume probably anything we're importing probably won't have secondary audio, but again, put whatever here you feel like you're gonna need a lot of. We can say primary, and we'll just call it audio. Primary audio clips. So we'll just say it's audio clip array of primary audio clips. Let's see, what else? What else? We're not going to worry about DMCA free audio clips, but you know, should you ever need it, you can. We don't care about visible. That's always going to be true. We can check sync. And now odds are we only care about syncing both or neither of them, so we're just going to have a single bool for syncing animation and audio. We're going to have a custom name, string custom name. Going to have lock type because this actually does, for this case we're not going to do it, but that's something that you probably will frequently change if I were to guess. We'll have a bool for DMCA. Should it ever come up, this is always important to have. People will thank you for actually marking stuff to be claimed by DMCA because people like to stream stuff. Audio level, we're just going to leave it. We're just going to say everything we're importing is the same physical audio level. Keep in mind that's not what you hear. That's a function in game that gets called to alert enemies and stuff to you. That's again not what you hear. It's what enemies hear. So we're just gonna say 0.3 everything. If we have we'll have a bool for can move during animation. That's what we'll assign to stop when move. Actually, that should be can't move, technically speaking. Have another bool for third person, and that's all we really need to do. So now what we can do is fill in these items. So instead of animation clip equaling all this, we can just say it's equal to primary clips. Excuse me, I didn't really mean to get rid of comments there. Primary clips, we can say secondary animation is equal to secondary clips. Looping is equal to looping. Primary audio clips is equal to primary audio clips. And again, we're assuming if we want to sync animation or audio, we want to sync both of them between players. So we're just going to set both of these equal to sync. We're going to have our custom name that you can input. Mark if it will get claimed by DMCA. Mark if you cannot move, because stop when move. If you cannot move, it will stop when you move. And if we want third person or not. And now with this done, this function, whenever we call it, will, using this and the defaults that we just left in here, because all of our animations share that, we'll just add that animation. So now we can go up here, and instead of having all this, we can do import animation, and we can just kind of use what we have already. So it's going in order. It's the animation clip array, the secondary animation clip array, the, let's see, looping. No, the audio is not looping. Keep in mind, this looping is for audio. For looping animations, that's in Unity, because that's just kind of how it works out. So the audio here is not looping. Primary audio clips, you can see it's highlighting. The Visual Studio or Writer or whatever you use will probably help you along when filling this out. It's that. Now we need our sync. We don't need to sync either of these. Custom name, again, that's Jotaro point. DMCA is not going to get claimed, no way. Can't move, again, for this one we're going to say yes. And for third person, we're going to say no. And with that, you can delete this entire section. And we're going to do the same thing for Jotaro, which you'll quickly see why we're doing this. Because you can have one block of code, and assuming everything shares the general needs of this, you can just funnel it in here. Again, you could kind of concatenate it just by adding a new animation clip params here, but I think this is a little bit neater. So for here, we're just gonna grab our deoppose, although actually nothing's different, so I'm just gonna copy that, and paste it there. Copy this text and paste it there because again, they're same location. Again, it's not looping. Gonna use the Dio audio instead. It is not syncing. Custom name is Dio Pose. Not going to get claimed by DMCA. And for this, we're going to do the opposite here. So you're allowed to move during the pose, and it is going to default to third person if the user doesn't have settings. And with that, we can delete that. And you might see it already feels a lot nicer here, because if you ever add another animation, again, that's like the same general parameters as these, boom, you're done. Rename what you need, change the parameters, that's it. Just one line of code for everything. So I highly recommend you stick to some sort of structure like this. Alright, and assuming I did everything right, we're going to click build solution. Again, F6, I usually just hit F6, but that's where it is if you don't know what your hotkey is. We can go back here and you can see we have our DLL and debug files next to the asset bundles folder. So from here, we're going to want to go all the way back up to Lethal Company, and you'll see quickly why I like using manual install for a test for creating mods rather than R2 Modman profiles. Again, you can just launch your R2 Modman profile if you're in that case. But for here, since we have the exe right here, we can actually just open it once, give it a moment so we don't have file reading conflicts, open it again, and since Lethal Company supports LAN mode, we can just open 2 copies of the game and see it working in 99.9% of what multiplayer is, just so you know it's working in multiplayer. You see, we have the second one. Thank you, Rune. Thank you for getting in my way. We'll just put that above your Steam name. We're gonna keep one big just so you can see what's going on easier, but keep the other one there just for the sake of it. We're also gonna turn audio on just one of them because otherwise we'll be hearing double audio, and I don't think anybody wants that. There is a weird bug with Lethal Company. This is vanilla from what I found. If you join a LAN session while it's still starting up, you can just soft lock your game and have to restart. So, you know, just wait for the LAN session to actually finish opening. And so now if we go here, customize, we can do @test emote mod, excuse me. Because if we look in our Visual Studio, you can see we named it test emote mod. So in Emotes API, we can do and then our mod name test emote mod, and you can see both the items here. We're just gonna drag those onto the top here. We'll do Dio Pose, Jotaro Point. Over here for this guy, test Dio Pose, Jotaro Point, just so it's on the same spot. And now, Jotaro Point, first person. If I move it, cancels it, because that's what we set in Visual Studio in this case. You're allowed to look around, but the moment you start walking, it will cancel the emote. And then there's the Dio Pose, which, you know, your mileage may vary on audio. Not exactly the best audio for showing off, but you know, just shows there. And we are holding the pose, and we're allowed to walk around freely with it. And you can see the other person is also allowed to pose as well. Works about as you would expect it to. So that's basically that's pretty much the basics. Doesn't really get too much worse than that. Well, it does, which I will get into very shortly. But if you're just looking to get your emote in, just to have it, it's that easy. I'd like to say it's easy. There's quite a few prerequisites, which we're trying to exclude some stuff like needing a coding setup to actually get this working. Again, there's not too much coding, but it is definitely a hurdle that will cause issue for some people we see. So we're trying to find a solution which will allow people to just drag and drop files and have it work. You'll still need Unity. There's not really much we can do to get around Unity. I mean, there is, but probably not going to happen. anyway, now that I went through the painstaking process of getting that set up on a moment's notice with no forethought, we're going to take this prefab, which for the record has the playable director and each of the menacing props with their own animator, which are set up on the timeline like this, which will look like something like this in game. You know, quality iffy, but it's there. It's a prop. Obviously, when you're making your props, probably put more than 30 minutes of effort into them and thought, because the more thought and effort you put in will probably show. But anyway, let's get it going. So let's open our asset bundle. For now, we'll create a new bundle. We'll create a props bundle. Put menacing prop in there. You see it's grabbing all of the required assets. You see it's yeah, it's just auto included. Build that. We'll see it show up here. And if we pull back up our lethal company, go back down into our what was it called? Test emote mod. Put that in our set bundles. Now if we go back into code, yeah, it's still loading, but you saw props showed up, so we know it has finished. So now we're going to go into our template mod, and we are going to look at this part that I mentioned earlier that I said we'd come back to for a little bit more complex solution. So whenever a bone mapper, literally anyone, not just you, it could be a friend, it could be an enemy. Enemies have emote skeletons, by the way. No one really takes advantage of it yet, but they can emote with anything that gets imported here. But whenever that changes, this where we can subscribe to this, and what we want to do is do a switch case, tab to get that, and we're going to switch based on new animation. And we do case. And keep in mind we want to check this is what it's looking for. When it calls back new animation, it's the whenever you're importing animation clips, it will be the first animation clip. So if you loaded in 10 different primary animation clips, it's always going to show you the first one in this array. So that's what we're looking for. So in this case, I don't think the Jotaro one really needs it. I think we'll just keep it on the DO one. So if we are playing the DO pose start, I'm going to cheat here and cut where I copy paste some code from Badass Company, but I'll go over it once I paste it in. Okay, now that we're back here, I copy pasted some stuff. You'll see what I changed. So just declaring int prop1. When we go here, prop1 is equal to the current bone mapper's prop count, which you can see after we add a prop, we can then access it with that prop1. That's because if the count was 0, so this is going to be equal to 0, then we add a prop, and then we want to access prop at position 0 because arrays start at 0. For those not familiar with programming details. But we want to instantiate this, so the prefab I created is menacing prop. Oh, Unity crashed. Awesome. Thank you, Unity. Anyway, I guess cutting to Unity not crashing. Okay, cutting back to when Unity is not crashing. I just wanted to see where this is located. Menacing prop. Menacing prop. So this would be, this is where the manifest can come in handy if you just want to copy paste, because if we look, menacing, oh there it is, sorry, I'm blind. We can just copy that, and in our code, I can just paste it right there, boom. That'll spawn our menacing prop. We want to set it to the mapper body transform. That's usually what you'll want to attach your props to. That's essentially attaching it to the player, the uppermost transform. For most cases, this is what you want to connected to unless you're trying to attach it to a specific body part. In which case, you can, yeah, you'll know it. You'll be able to find it. I trust you. Good luck. Set local position to. I think if we look in Unity, if we just kind of eyeball it around this player model, if we just put him at 0, 0, 0, put a menacing prop in. Oh, I lost my timeline when Unity crashed. That's fun. Thanks, Unity. Hide gizmos. So if we look at this from this perspective, I think we probably want it like here. We just eyeball it like this. Maybe more like there. We actually might want to scale it down a little bit. But for this case, it'll be fine. Yeah, we'll call it area good. So where's that in relation to the player? So we're gonna say that's our actual local position. Do vector 3 of that, and this. For reference, I'm putting F after all of these to denote that it's a float value. Excuse me, that was local Euler angles I was changing. We do want that to be just vector 3.0. And with that, let us see, we can build it. Again, I just pressed F6 to build. Then we can go back here and see in game if it works. I'm just gonna launch one for now just to keep it simple. We'll get another one going. Why not? See multiple people with it. For reference, what you see popping up whenever I start that, I kind of have to close out of the way, is Unity Explorer. Very, very useful for debugging because you can just look through the scene hierarchy and check stuff, various things, transform positions, what's attached to an object, so forth. Highly recommend it if you need to start debugging constant stuff. Anyway, gonna mute this instance. Join. That is not working. How fun. Let's see. Deopose _ start. Did I paste it right in code? Right. Right, yes, okay, well, I'm gonna leave this in because this is a good thing to note. It's very nice. I will never remove this from debug log when you do an emote. You see how that's deopose start like that? You see how this is different? See how it's different? Yeah, it has caps. Because it's very precise. Yeah, we didn't need caps here, but the actual file name has caps in the names, so make sure that's accurate. Or you could create a string, new animation to lower is equal to new animation dot to lower, and that'll just give you the new animation in complete lowercase, which maybe you prefer. That way you don't have to deal with weird stuff like this. But I'm gonna leave that in because I genuinely forgot, and you might genuinely forget and be like, "What's wrong? Why is it not detecting my emote?" It's because by default this is the actual file name with proper caps and everything. So that's what we need to actually do it. Anyway, building again. Just gonna launch 2 instances again, and we'll probably get somewhere this time. Again, we're just going to shrink this down. yes, it's well, it's sideways. But you know, progress is progress. Trying to think about why it would be sideways. Oh, I'm setting these Euler angles to 0. What are the Euler angles in here? Right, that makes sense. Because if the Euler angles are 0 here on the timeline. Right. Yeah, I guess that's technically on me because the Euler angles here were 90 to make it look right in playing, and I just ignored that. So also gotta leave that in. You know, just be aware of what you set stuff to look like in Unity, and because if you don't copy that, it's probably gonna look wrong. And now that I've done it right, and now I've tackled, I believe, everything, it should look correct in game. Because I actually followed what I put in Unity, which I clearly didn't do the first 2 times. One last try for the road. It's gonna work. You're gonna work 100% guarantee it'll work this time. Look at that. They should probably be on a separate layer because they are interfering with a third-person camera. But that's a technical issue with the props and not the prop system, because technically speaking, that is a valid use case that I have experimented with before back in Risk of Rain, is spawning in literal environment props. So it does make sense that you can create stuff that has a layer that interacts with like third-person cameras and stuff, or just would have collision. Does this have collision actually? Let's see. Oh, it does. Look at that, it does. Yeah. So, you know, maybe this isn't ideal for this kind of prop. But that does actually show what you can do if you so desire. Is you can actually make stuff that people can truly interact with. And while that's not quite correct here, it'd be a simple change to just make this stuff not. It would be on a layer that doesn't collide with things. But you can see, I mean, you know, it's there, it's working. Its loop, however quality or low quality you might consider that to be, it definitely is there. So that's general props in a nutshell. Like I've sung its praises a few times. It's a timeline animator. I mean, you saw it. That's just so convenient. I highly recommend it for making props should it ever come to it, because if it looks like that in the timeline animator, from our experience, 99% of the time it'll look like that in game, assuming you know rotate stuff, and don't accidentally change the rotation after importing it. So yeah, that's props. There's a few other technical details to making stuff, but that's all on the Lethal Emotes API wiki, which is linked from the mod page or just on our GitHub. You can eyeball there, see if there's something else you need, or just reach out to us. It's Nunchuk, NUNCHUK, on Discord. Just, you know, if you, or preferably, instead of DMing me, just go into the official Lethal Company modding from Thunderstorm and go into the Lethal Emotes API Discord and send it there, so that way it's public, and if someone else has a similar question, they can find you asking the question and hopefully getting an answer so they can have it fixed. Also, which I will put an editor's note in, you can see, yeah, I got the head rotation working. That was a bug on my on Emotes API and not my import settings. All my import settings were fine. I'm pushing out a hotfix right after this video with the correct emote skeleton for the player. But yeah, there it is. That's importing emotes.